Howdy and welcome to the Confidence Through Health podcast. I'm Jerry Snyder. As an elite level athlete, owner of All In Health and Wellness, and author of the book Confidence Through Health, my goal is to help you achieve your goals and dreams using health as the conduit to get there.
To find you a man, oh, you long to hold in your hand the hand of the one that'll never...
I want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor for this episode, American Sports and Fitness Association. If you are looking for a certification as personal trainer or a group fitness instructor, anything in the sports and fitness world, water aerobics, running, health coach even, anything in that area, you can find the certification at the American Sports and Fitness Association. You can also find textbooks and manuals to be able to help you study up to become certified in any of those areas. If you go to confidencethroughhealth.com, or you can look at the link in the show notes, you'll find the link for the American Sports and Fitness Association, and it will take you there, and you can find the certification that will take you to the career that will change your life. Howdy, and welcome back to the Confidence Through Health podcast. This is episode 134, where I have a discussion with Victoria Evans. She is an intuitive eating coach, and what that means, as she'll explain, is she basically tries to teach people how to eat the way that your body wants to be fed. So she talks a lot about not necessarily the nutrition piece, even though that's important, but it's more about the timing, and it's more about the relationship with food and trying to discover your best life in your best relation with food, and having that help your mindset, having that help your relationships, having that help your community, your work life. It all blends in together. And so it's a neat discussion. It's a neat topic, and it's a great perspective. Whether you're male or female, we talk a lot about the way it works with females, but it's whether you're male or female, and her story about trying to do it the quote unquote normal way of dieting or following a fad, hyped up way of, getting your body in shape or getting your body in what society says is in shape, to learning how to have a proper relationship with food on her own, and now teaching other people as an intuitive eating coach. So I think you're going to enjoy it. Her name is Victoria Evans, and definitely connect with her through the links at the bottom of the page. All right. So thank you, Victoria, for joining me on the Confidence Through Health podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So one of the things that I'm really, excited about is the fact that you're an intuitive eating coach, which I think a lot of people probably don't understand what that means. But as we get into that, talk a little bit about how you came about wanting to be a coach, and how that became a passion, and then why into the intuitive eating side of things.
Yeah. So, I never could have imagined that I would end up doing this for a living.
Right.
I'm someone who struggled with food and body my entire life, and was really convinced that happiness lay in a certain body size. And once I reached that size, my life would start. And so I spent my life on and off diets, doing, buying different workout plans, watching Biggest Loser, all the,
right.
Typical kind of diet culture things you consume and perceive as normal. And, I struggled my weight up and down, struggled with bulimia, exercise addiction, all these different things. And at the time I was late teens, early 20s. And I started working for a big Fortune 500 beauty company. And I had this moment where I was like, I'm really going to dial in. I'm really going to lose the weight. And then I'm going to be happy. And then I'm going to start living. And I went on this crazy Instagram influencer weight loss program. And it was results guaranteed. She had the best abs, millions of followers. And yeah, I bought her program and I started to follow it. And I remember messaging her and being like, I feel dizzy and I feel like it's not enough food. And she's like, oh no, that's normal. Your stomach is shrinking. Just fast more and drink more coffee and you'll be fine. I was like, it's a bit disordered, but I was like, but you're the expert, right? And I think that's, even coming, we'll touch on intuitive eating, but so many people, they don't know you, they don't know your body. Right. And so when my body was saying, this is not enough food, there's something going wrong here. And I had those little warning bells coming up, but then I looked at her millions of followers, her abs, all her little trophies. And I was like, no, I must trust her because she must know my body instead of me.
Right. Right.
So blindly following this program and started losing weight very quickly. I ended up posted all over her social media, my before and after photos. Oh my God, Victoria's killing it on my program. She looks so amazing. Getting all these compliments and comments from all these people I didn't know. She looked terrible before. She looks amazing now. La, la, la. And so I was losing weight. And I was just becoming more obsessive and more controlling around food. And my life wasn't getting any better. In fact, it was getting a lot worse, more anxious, more everything. And this kind of continued to spiral on until I had this really rock bottom moment where I'd been struggling with anorexia. This was kind of a little bit of time on. And I remember having a handful of trail mix at 3 a.m. and panicking because I was like, I can't have this food in my body. And crawling to the closet at 3 a.m. and pulling on my running clothes and deciding that 30 kilometers at 3 a.m. was an adequate punishment for a handful of trail mix.
Oh my gosh.
And running through the streets of Montreal, like in the pitch black and like the headlights of cars, like lighting up my face as I was crying. And like, I was so tired and I didn't want to be there, but I didn't know how to not be there.
Right.
And I remember getting to the top of Mount Royal in Montreal, and the sun was just starting to come up over the city, and just having this moment where I'm like, there's never going to be enough weight loss where this is going to be enough, where I'm going to find happiness. And, all these things that I'm doing to myself, this can't be healthy. I'd lost my period. My hair was falling out. I was a mess, chasing this illusion of happiness in a body size. And so ran down the hill and called the eating disorder hotline and started my recovery journey. And when I started my journey, I was very frustrated that all the resources available to me were very much just talk about your emotions. Well, for me, I was using food and trying to fix and control my body to avoid how I was feeling. So all of a sudden, I was going to talk about how I was feeling a couple times a week without using or having rather any coping mechanisms outside of that. You're kind of taking away my coping mechanism of exercising and control of food. And then you're forcing me to kind of confront all these things head on.
Yeah.
And so I started getting worse. And I had to really have this intentional moment of like, okay, if I want to really save my life and really, take ownership and get better, I have to do this myself. So I started researching like a crazy person, understanding everything about anorexia and bulimia and binge eating, exercise addiction, orthorexia, all these different things. And unknowingly kind of put together this program of really science-based information. So I call myself a science-based intuitive eating coach because I'm a firm believer that education is empowerment. And when we understand why we're doing something, that's when we can change it. Not from a place of shame, not from a place of, can't believe that, what is wrong with me? I'm so broken. I'm disgusting, blah, blah, blah. Right. And, I talk about my coaching, like it's not self-sabotage, it's self-protection from an unmet need. And so understanding what is that unmet need? What is that thing that's going on in my body right now that's making me act this way? And once we can understand that, we can start to kind of make those, really incredible steps forward. So was putting together this program for myself to save my own life, very science-based, lots of tools, eventually, does lead into emotions and all that kind of stuff, but really grounding it with the foundation of, science, why, understanding your brain. And from there, I started talking a little bit on social media about it. People started to ask me about my, what I was doing, how it was working, started to work with beta clients. So just free people to go through my program. And like, maybe it worked for me, maybe it didn't. And then ultimately ended up quitting my fancy corporate job and, coaching full time. And I also moved to Bali for a few years, and I was living in Portugal for a few years. And now I'm living in Thailand. So complete 180 in my life. And so that's your very long-winded answer to how I became a coach.
No, but that's cool. But and I think that's important because like you said, you saved your life through it. And that's a big step in like understanding what's really going on, because like you said, everybody's a little different. And like, while and I tell people like everybody's cells are basically the same, but like what your genes are tell those cells to do different things. And so like you can't just go blindly behind somebody, because if you're not understanding your body and how you feel, and like if you're not in tune with that, then you may see results from like what society says. Like you said, like people were like, hey, you're killing it, you're doing great. No, but you're like, but I don't feel right. And that's not good to be in that position.
No. And so many of the people that we see online, that we see on social media, like they're not healthy, you know?
Right.
My body, which was, I was very fit, I was shredded with abs, and I looked so quote unquote healthy while having never been more sick in my life.
Yeah.
And health has really nothing to do with our external appearance,
Right.
and it's so unfortunate that our society is so built up on that, because at the end of the day, yeah, our internal, what's going on inside can, it really doesn't reflect necessarily what's going on the outside. So
Right.
yeah.
And that's that perfectionism that we think we have to achieve based on what we see, whether it's, what used to be magazine covers and now it's Instagram, and like, and there's filters for all those things. And it's like, even the people that are, quote unquote shredded, they're still filtering it to make it look even better. And it's like, man, when you see these people in real life, it's like, and that's one of the things that I like about like myself, when I keep myself healthy, and because I focus on the cells. Like if my cells are healthy, eventually everything else in my body is going to be healthy, because it's just going to have to work that way. And I don't know how many times I get stopped in the store and they're like, man, your skin's so great. What do you do? And I'm like, I really don't do anything.
Yeah.
Like
just the byproduct.
Yeah, exactly. It's the byproduct, and it's that perfectionism as a byproduct and not like what we should be seeking.
Yeah. And that's what I always say with clients, like people so often focus on weight loss. Like I want to lose weight, I want to lose weight. It's like, that can be the byproduct of getting to your set point weight, which is I talk about, like when you're really taking care of yourself. Intuitive eating is very much a framework of self-care, looking at your eating habits, looking at your movement habits, looking at your mental health, your emotional health, your connections with others. Like it's such a holistic approach. And the byproduct of that could be weight loss. It could be weight gain if you're under that, what your body actually naturally wants you to be at. But that's not even the point, because the point is that you're going to feel good in your body. And the only reason we want to lose weight usually in the first place is because we think we're going to be happier and our life is going to be so much better when we get there. But rather, it's the pursuit of the behaviors that make you feel good that is actually what's going to make you feel better.
Right. And like, so talk about like, because obviously you were, like we said, in society's mind, you looked the part, but internally you weren't there. And so like, how did you, when did you finally start to realize like, oh, wait, now this is turning, right? Like you had given up on the other plan, you started fixing yourself, and like, talk about like the change in how you were able to feel in your body and like understand your body better, knowing like internally I'm healthy now.
Yeah, so much of this I didn't realize was related to the nervous system. I didn't realize I was living my entire life in a state of fight or flight. Like I was just constantly on edge, constantly anxious. And so, some nights I was like passing out from exhaustion because I was just so jacked up on coffee and then working out and all the different things. So one of the biggest changes that I noticed was just an inner sense of peace and calm that I'd spent my entire life trying to avoid myself and try to escape myself, thinking that, a smaller body would make me want to be with myself. Right. But at the end of the day, it was like, I realized my body, my nervous system felt like it was constantly being under attack. I was not closing that stress response cycle, and rather my eating habits and how I was moving my body was creating more and more and more stress. And I was never regulating that in any capacity. And so because society tells us that when we reach a certain size or certain look, we will be happy, we just continue to chase it because we never feel it. We never feel calm, and we never feel happy, or it's such a fleeting moment. Maybe it's a look on the scale and it goes down, or maybe it is a compliment, but it's not sustainable. It's not long-term. It's not a baseline of feeling confident and comfortable in your own skin. And so for myself, I didn't realize I could feel that calm and have that much capacity and space and energy to even contemplate leaving my job at the time, or creating a different life for myself, because it took so much energy, and my body, again, felt like it was under attack. So it was spending all its resources trying to find me food or worrying about what I looked like, because it was thought that was the main problem, when in reality it had really nothing to do with it.
Right. Well, and one of the things I listened to one of your episodes on your podcast, weighing in on happy, and you were talking about the different like triggers to eating and cravings and things like that. And I think what one of the things you're talking about now brings it up is like that boredom factor of like, you're bored, and like, I read somewhere else, it's like sometimes you just got to be able to, if you can't sit with yourself with no other distractions, nothing going on, no Netflix, no phone. Like how long can you sit with yourself and just be you? And it's like, and if you can't, then like you said, that's the fight or flight in your nervous system. And like, there's some issues there, but also like, is your first thought, I need to go get something to eat?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're probably not
Yeah.
doing that out of hunger or out of necessity to feed yourself. It's out of, I can't think of anything else to do.
Yeah, we are in a society that craves constant stimulation. With our phones, we're so used to having constant hits of dopamine, always refreshing, getting the notifications. And so when the hustle and bustle and crazes of the day is winding down and what's left is just you and your thoughts about you, that can be a very scary place for people. And so people will default to food because they don't want to sit with that. And yeah, they're bored. So they're lacking stimulation. Their brain wants stimulation because it's not used to not being stimulated throughout the day, which is an exhausting thing as well, right? It's such a beautiful thing when we can create space for ourselves, because that's when we think new thoughts. That's when we have revelations. That's when we really discover and find out who we are and what we want instead of just being in this reaction mode all day long. But yeah, boredom hunger is such a real thing. And for so many people, like later into the evening, that kind of pops up and, they're watching TV and then the thoughts creep in, or they're going to bed and they want another snack just to get another hit of dopamine, another hit of distraction from the thoughts going on. And so, all these different diets, all these different things are such a Band-Aid solution because you're trying to fix yourself, quote unquote, your external appearance. But what's really going on is the internal thoughts that you're trying to escape and thinking that changing your body is going to fix those thoughts about yourself.
Right.
And it's a Band-Aid over a bullet wound. So you'll be constantly chasing, the next diet plan or the next job or the next car or the next house, thinking that's a solution to how you feel about yourself internally. So until you do that internal work, it's exhausting. You're just constantly chasing.
Right. And a big piece of that internal work is understanding what to eat. Right. You've got to have the right nutrients to be able to for your nervous system, your brain to work properly, for the right hormones to be produced, and all of those things. And so it's like you said, it's forgetting about, the external appearance for like 6 months or a year, or just like, it doesn't matter anymore. Like, you got to come to that point where it's like, it doesn't matter what I look like. It doesn't matter what the scale says. I need to make sure that internally I can be okay. I can be with myself. I can not have these anxious thoughts, not have the depressive thoughts, not have, or, I mean, you can have them, but not like at a sustained long-term, and so much of that comes from food, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And so, the way that I coach, I'm not a certified dietitian, I'm not a nutritionist. So I don't teach nutrition in any capacity, but a lot of people that I work with, they know what to eat, but they don't know why they're not eating those things. So I really work with people in the psychology of it. It's like, why, when I know I should be eating, the protein heavier foods and the, like all those kind of things. Right. And they're binging on 10 pounds of chocolate a night. They're like, where is the disconnect happening here? Where this is what I want and this is what I'm doing. And so breaking that down and understanding what is actually going on is so empowering. So it's like, oh, I'm not broken. There's nothing wrong with me. Right. It's just, in that kind of example, sometimes like maybe I didn't eat enough that morning. My more primitive brain is taking over, kind of hijacking my prefrontal cortex that is making the more rational, higher level decisions. There's kind of like a little bit of a mental fight that kind of ensues. So you have the kind of, I shouldn't have this. No, I want it. Okay, I'll have it. And then once I finish it, I won't buy any more. And tomorrow I'll get back on track and I'll be good. Right. And then you go for it and you eat it. And even just as I was talking, like the language of, I'll be good, I'll get back on track. Like it creates a scarcity and it creates a polarization of the language. It's very all or nothing, perfectionism. And so when I say working with clients, restriction creates rebellion and allowance creates space for choice. So once we have the permit, I can go and have 10 pounds of chocolate. I have permission to do that.
Right.
And giving yourself that permission, right? But then knowing I probably won't feel great. So that's where the self-care piece comes into it. But telling yourself it's off limits. I'm not allowed to have it. If I have one bite, I've already ruined my eating for the day. So I might as well finish the whole thing. It can spiral so quickly versus if you have that permission and allowance and understanding the psychology behind it, it's it can be, a couple squares of chocolate or half a bar or whatever, and it not turn into this, earth-shattering end of the world. Now I have to finish everything in the kitchen, and then tomorrow I'll go out and buy a super quote unquote clean, grocery cart.
Right. Yeah. And it's very similar to one of the things that I tell people is because a lot of people come in when they're asking me about their nutrition or whatever, and okay, well, can I have a cheat day? And I'm like, why would you want a cheat day? Why is that and beside the fact that like, okay, well, if you're eating things that are toxic for you, that's bad. But the terminology, like you were saying, like the terminology from a psychological standpoint, like I take people usually back to like grade school. And I'm like, when you're in grade school, you didn't want to be the cheater, right? Like that was like, you didn't want to be labeled the person who was cheating because then you got sent to the principal's office or whatever, right? And you had all these negative consequences. And so it's like, I don't want to be the cheater. So why are you calling yourself a cheater in your nutrition and cheating your body and cheat? Like now you're putting your negative thoughts in yourself, like, oh, I'm just a cheater. I can't sustain this. I can't do this. I can't, and then you're down that negative spiral, like you said, and it compounds over and over. And then one quote unquote cheat day becomes 2, becomes 3. And then it's, oh, I'll start in January.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll happen on a Wednesday. You're like, oh, well, the week is ruined. I might as well get back on track on Monday.
Right.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the time people have a hard time not using that polarizing language because they think that if they were to give themselves an ounce of self-compassion, an ounce of self-acceptance, that it would mean that they're okay with who they are then. And that is unacceptable to them. But rather, like flipping it on his head, we have to be acknowledging where we're at right now and moving forward with curiosity and compassion if we want to make sustainable steps forward. If we're constantly telling ourselves, I can't believe I ate that, I'm disgusting, what's wrong with me, I'm gross, blah, 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 we're just creating so much shame. Shame triggers the same part of our brain as if we're in actual physical pain. When we're in actual physical pain, our primitive brain hates that, right? It wants to avoid those feelings of pain as a survival technique. And if in the past, the only, coping mechanism you have to avoid pain is eating food, right?
Right.
What you basically done is set yourself up to go and eat a bunch of food, which was the opposite thing of what you want to do in the first place.
Yep.
So, I always say like, negative self-talk creates negative actions. Positive self-talk creates positive actions. So when you're going to look in the mirror and about to beat yourself down, or you had, the food that you didn't necessarily want to finish the whole thing you did, whatever you're about to do, that next moment, that next step will basically define, what path forward you're taking. I look at it like a fork in the road. Like you have the choice. You can say, yeah, that was not that was not ideal. That, I ate more than I wanted to, or I'm not loving how I'm looking right now, but that's okay. I'm doing the best I can, or here's what happened. Like taking a second to get curious. Did I eat enough today? Was I super stressed? Was I overwhelmed? Did I, whatever the things are. And instead of shaming yourself, getting curious and using it as a learning point, so the next time, maybe we can choose differently, as opposed to just shaming whatever the behavior was, never understanding what the heck the trigger was, and then just continuing to repeat that behavior again and again, right? It's that quote, I think everyone says it's Albert Einstein, but I'm always told it's like misattributed to him, but insanity is doing the same thing again and again, expecting different results. Like shaming yourself every single time is not going to create the positive changes you want in your life. So try something different, right? And it'll work, surprise. Giving yourself that positive praise actually gives you hits of dopamine. Dopamine is a renewable energy source, whereas that shame, right, creates that pain, but it's also like, just blowing through cortisol, creating so much exhaustion. And it's just not a fun way to live either when you're being mean to yourself all the time. It's just not fun to be with yourself.
Right. Well, and for women, like, especially like in just the hormone level and the hormone, changes and how that affects, your fight or flight responses in your just the increase in cortisol, the increase in estrogen that comes along with that. It's like, it can really do a lot of damage on a hormonal level that, people can then start thinking like you said, like, oh, I'm worthless. I'm not good for anything. I can't do this. When it's really, it's a byproduct of like, you made one bad decision when it comes to food, but it compounded so big. And now it's like this huge elephant that I can't deal with because the hormones are just out of whack.
Yeah, it can easily spiral, but like it is that perfectionism all or nothing approach that we usually get so stuck in. And, perfectionism is, Brene Brown quote, if I'm not lovable for who I am, then I'll become lovable for what I can achieve or what I can look like. And so many people, they feel like they're not worthy, they're not enough, they're not okay as they are. And so they try to change themselves. And the perfectionism comes into this because the one small thing, they're like, everyone's going to notice it. Everyone's going to see it. I'm so unworthy. And it just, it spirals and compounds versus it could be that little micro moment that we get curious and compassionate. And then we just build from there as a learning point instead of a full breakdown point.
Right. No, that's true. And so one of the things that you said a few minutes ago was like, you get to that fork in the road and you decide what you're going to do. And one of the things that I try to get my clients to understand is like, one, you're probably, if you're standard following just a standard way that society, like America's eating, this most of the Western world's eating, like you're probably on autopilot when it comes to food. You have no idea what's like nutrition's going in your body or what non-nutrition's going in your body. You're just eating because you've got cravings and you're following those. But once we get past that point, which it's different for people, but it can be 2 weeks to a month or so, that you can get past that craving point and then go, okay, now I want you to make a manual decision. And so you're at that fork in the road. And it's like, like you said, you got total permission to go eat the whole box of candy bars or 2 bags of chips or whatever that's, your thing that you're after, the big bag of Starburst, whatever it is. You have total permission to do that. But what I try to get them is, I want you to make a manual decision to do it based on, what the consequences are afterwards. Right? Like we all need, like I should say we all need, but like a lot of people in the world are struggling and they need money. They need help, right? They need financial help. And so it's like, they have the option. They could go rob a bank, right? Like they could go rob somebody. They could go but they don't, because they know what the consequences are.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, okay, I can't do that because of consequences. Well, now it's like, all you have to do is do that with your food and go like, okay, I could eat that big, huge thing of candy or whatever it is that you're falling to when it comes to food and cravings. It's like, I could go do that, but I want you to go, before you do that, what are the consequences? How are you going to feel tomorrow? How are you going to feel in an hour? Right? Like sometime, depending on what it is, like, how are you going to feel? What is that going to put your body through? How long is it going to take you to recover from that? And then oftentimes it can become like, okay, instead of the whole box or the whole, bag of chips, I can actually have a serving and I'll be okay.
Yeah. And I think with that, one of the things that I always look at with clients is that oftentimes it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy when they make the quote unquote wrong choice. So they feel bad about themselves. They feel like they're not worthy, they're not enough. And so when they have that fork in the road, the choice is to go back to what is comfortable, to not make the choice to be the better version of themselves that would make the choice that is, improving their health, their life, everything, because that's unfamiliar. And for our brain, unfamiliar is unsafe. And so that limiting belief of like, I'm unworthy and I'm not lovable and I'm not desirable. And all those subconscious thoughts that are firing throughout the day. If we have the choice to have the chocolate cake at night or, have the Greek yogurt or, whatever the thing is that you want to have, that are like kind of quite, on different ends of the spectrum. Oftentimes I see, I work with clients, they opt to choose the chocolate cake, for example, simply because they are so used to that narrative about themselves, even though they want to consciously change it. Subconsciously, they still have to work through so many things to recondition themselves to believe that they are worthy of making the other choice. Right. Because at the end of the day, it's our subconscious that is really, calling the shots. And if it feels like it's unsafe to do something that is out of what is familiar and comfortable, it's very difficult to choose otherwise. And then we beat ourselves up and go, what is wrong with us? Which then creates more reinforcement, right? That self-fulfilling prophecy of like, see, I did eat the cake. I am broken. What is wrong with me? And again, just kind of continues on that lovely little downward spiral.
Right. Yeah. That like, I can't control myself piece of it, and it's like, you can, you just, it's hard and it takes some discipline, it does. And it's, and at the end of the day, that's something that we don't want, like we don't want to have discipline anymore. We just want to relax and, watch Netflix and chill. And it's like, and sometimes we still have to have that discipline when it comes to food. So how can we slow down and eat mindfully, like and be in control? Like what are some things that we can do to like start taking that back?
Yeah. So 2 things. The first thing is that double check you're not under eating for most of the day. I find a lot of people like, before I kind of go in my tool for this, but just something I've noticed coming up in my community is like, people will have just the coffee in the morning and then not eat for most of the day. And then are convinced, they're confused rather why they're feeling out of control when they're eating later into the evening. And basically they're backloading their eating for the day. And it's because your body naturally, from a survival, standpoint, needs to get those calories in to get your energy levels back up for survival. So you're going to be binging and eating all these foods if you've not, given yourself food throughout the day. So, before you even can give a tool to be more mindful, it might be within your body's rights, as it were, to be getting you to eat these foods in a non-mindful way if you've kind of triggered that feast famine, right? Like kind of scarcity mindset because you've, not giving yourself permission to eat food all day. So the first thing is I would say, double check that, because if you're, eating out of control, that could be the reason why. And this tool won't necessarily work if that's why. The second thing is, so I like tools that are very practical, easy, that we can kind of integrate into our life. So what I started doing years and years ago was going to your phone, going to your alarms on your phone, creating silent alarms on your phone, and changing where it says the word alarms to things like check in. How are you feeling? Are you hungry? Breathe. What's going on? How can I support myself? Like all those kind of little mini, statements that kind of just make you pause, because the mindful eating is not just about mindful eating. It's about being mindful in other areas of your life. If you're, if you eat really quickly, you're also probably driving really quickly. Maybe you're speaking really quickly. Like that, right? It's that nervous system, fight or flight, go, 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 anxious, can't slow down feeling. And so we have to train ourselves, not just in the moments we're eating, but also in the other areas of our life, other moments of our life, to slow down and check in. And so I use the analogy as almost like you start the day and each thing that happens, you're being like tossed a bowling pin. And by the end of the day, you're like, have like 10,000 bowling pins being tossed in the air. And then it's like, okay, now be mindful. And you're just like, it's so overwhelming. There's so many thoughts going on in there. I have no idea how to cope with them. My only coping mechanism is food. So I'm going to go eat food and let all these bowling pins fall behind me. Versus, getting kind of being tossed, the email from the boss or the partner says something that triggers you, whatever, and looking at that and then taking a second to process it and then putting it down, right? So that's kind of how I look at these little check-ins, these little mindful moments throughout the day, building in that kind of awareness of yourself, building in the ability to kind of self-regulate within those little micro moments so that when it gets later in the day, when you're sitting alone with your own thoughts, you've worked through a lot of them already. You've started to regulate your nervous system to get back to that baseline instead of end of the day. And you're just shooting way up, cortisol levels through the roof, and then wondering why you can't sleep and wondering why you're so hungry and you blah, blah, blah. Right. So, yeah.
And one of the things that I always tell people is like, after talking to them, and when I find out that one of their issues is like, they've got so much going on and they just like, it's almost like decision fatigue, it's like, and it's like, okay, well, when those things come up, like keep a pad of paper with you and just write it down and then give your permission to not think about it because it's written down. Like you have to come back to the pad of paper. It can't just be something you just throw away. It's like, oh, I wrote it down, throw it away. Like, no, you're responsible. You have to come back and follow up on those things. But it doesn't have to just ruminate. Like you said, it doesn't have to be one of those things that just sits there, because at the end of the day, you're going to go, oh, I didn't do this. I didn't do this. I didn't do this. I didn't do this. And then like we were talking about with the food side of it, it then also becomes, well, now I'm a failure because I didn't meet all these requirements and I didn't do all these things. And what am I doing with my life? And then it's so easy to go to food because it gives that quick dopamine fix. To get our emotions back to where we think we want to be.
Exactly. And, with all those thoughts going around, a lot of the time, for myself, it was like kind of thoughts, but also just like this anxious impending doom kind of feeling. I didn't even necessarily have a word for it. And the thing about that you're saying about getting it onto paper or speaking it out or messaging a friend or whatever, the thing is, your emotional center of your brain, that limbic system, doesn't have language. It doesn't have the ability to actually speak whatever the heck is going on. And because, the part of your brain, the amygdala, decides whether or not something is a threat, if you have just all this anxious feeling penting up and you have no way to verbalize it, you're just telling your brain, hey, there's a threat. Hey, there's a lion coming over the, over the hill, whatever. And the only way that you know how to deal with this lion is to basically go and get food. Right. And so when we're writing it down, speaking it out, sharing it with someone, whatever that is, and adding language to it, right? All of a sudden, we're getting out of that more emotional center of the brain that can be very reactionary to different things going on. Thinking a lot of things are different, threats, getting more into that prefrontal cortex, higher thinking, rational thinking, future thinking, all that. So when we're naming it, we're already starting to process the emotion. We're already starting to move through it instead of just letting it swirl around in our brain and kind of spiral and become, and then I die alone, or whatever that end of the sentence is.
Right. And to touch on your alarms in your phone. So one of the things that you mentioned breathing, you mentioned like, and those things are also so important, like breathing and taking just like, whether it's meditation time or prayer time or whatever it is, like just that pause, and having those in. And I know that there's a lot of people and a lot of like there's the 5 a.m. club, and I follow that a little bit, but it's like that a lot of people are stacking it at the very beginning of the day. Right. And it's like, set my day up and then go and attack my day and do my day. And it's like, but you also need to do those things throughout the day. That's why I like your alarm thing. Like it's like, you need to have that alarm that goes off and goes like, oh, hey, wait, you need to pause. Yeah. So these things don't build up. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I was, really struggling, one of the alarms was, 4-7-8 breathing. It was also box breathing, like reminders to go off. And every time I'd be, walking to work or I was driving in a car, I would mentally be drawing the box, like, the Navy SEAL tactical, like inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And even simple things like that are so incredibly powerful, so incredibly important, because you can't think rationally if your brain thinks it's under attack. Right. It's like, you're automatically kicking into that survival instinct, fight or flight or shut down. And so when we're doing those simple, like things like breathing techniques, meditation, all those types of things, we're getting out of that, fight or flight state, out of that more, that sympathetic, more emotional center of your brain, back into the higher thinking part of your brain. And you can actually make rational decisions. Do I want to eat this food or do I want to eat that food? Do I want to go for the walk or do I want to lie in bed? But those decisions, that fork in the road, isn't even accessible to us if our brain thinks we're being chased by a lion.
That's true, because your subconscious is just going to say stay alive.
Yeah, exactly. That's a priority.
We got to do what we got to do to exist. And unfortunately, like there's so much, even though we've got all this technology and all this, like we're so much farther advanced than 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, and like, but our brain still lives in that. And I think that's hard for some people to understand, like, because it's like, I wasn't ever exposed to that. Like, how is my brain still in that state? But it's like that part of the evolution of the subconscious is so much we don't understand about how it works. Yeah. But when you see and you put it through stressors, through the researchers that are doing it and they're putting it through stressors, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is total like primitive actions. And you have no control over what you're going to do. Yeah, exactly. And it's why I love taking this brain-based, science-based approach, because it's like, oh, that's why I'm doing that behavior. That's why I feel out of control. There's nothing wrong with me. It was that subconscious, primitive survival part of your brain making that decision for you. And you had no say in it. So like, you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. In fact, there's something right with you, because your body had a response to a threat that thought was going to kill you. And it did what it knew what to do in the past to keep you alive. So now it's about how can we regulate the nervous system? How can we understand ourselves better? How can we have more tools? Like food is a tool. Yeah, let's add in more tools. Exercise is a tool. Let's add in more tools to that tool belt so that we have more options available to us when we're in those moments where our nervous system, our biology is starting to freak out a little bit. We don't necessarily have to be kind of the victim of it, as it were. So for those, and I know you work mostly with women. So for those women that are out there that are like, that are like, I'm struggling with the understanding of what, like what I'm supposed to look like, what I'm supposed to be like, what I'm supposed to like, because of what society has put out there. Like I'm struggling with who I am. Like, how do you help them, or what would you suggest for them as far as like understanding the first steps of like how to practice self-love, how to get to where you're like, no, I'm okay. This is who I am. This is who I'm supposed to be. Yeah. I think the first thing is really understanding that our brain is wired to want to fit into a group. Like our brain is just wired for tribal communal living. And so our society, especially with things like social media and TV and everything, we are shown a very particular narrative of who we're supposed to look like and who we're supposed to be. And because our brain is very adverse in, to looking differently and the shame and all that kind of thing, because it's survival technique, thousands of years ago, if I wasn't fitting into the tribe, if I wasn't assimilating to the tribe and I was kicked out, I would die.
So we have the genes passed forward to today are the people who want to assimilate, the people who want to fit in, the people who want to avoid the feelings of shame, because in our brain, it goes, if I don't fit into this group, I'm going to go die alone. Right. That's like our brain thinks that way. And so then we're inundated with social media and all these things that tell us we should look a certain way, and it's heavily filtered and all of that. And so one of the things I, tell people is like, your brain is telling you, if you don't look a certain way, you're basically going to go and die. Right. And that's your primitive brain talking. That actually has nothing to do with the reality of the situation. And so what I always like to, like a simple tip to suggest to people is create an environment for yourself where you feel safe to be yourself. Right. So if your social media feed looks nothing like, anything you look like, or, so for example, if you have cellulite on your legs and your feed has absolutely no one who has ever had cellulite looking, or it's heavily airbrushed or whatever, add in lots of people with cellulite. Add in lots of people with bodies larger than yours, and people who are not just doing, fitness influencer workouts that make you feel like you're not okay as you are. Because basically that's just telling your brain, hey, we don't fit into this tribe. Hey, we're not enough, creating shame, feelings of not enoughness. And so even like when you can be intentional about the environment you're creating, like what are you listening to? Who are you talking to? What are you reading? And don't necessarily create a feed where you're like, I aspire to be that person, versus creating a feed where I feel safe to be myself. And that can be a mix of different things. But that would be the first thing. And then when it comes to things like self-love and radical self-love, radical self-love is basically, rejecting an oppressive culture that has deemed us unworthy and in need of fixing. A culture and system basically that has ranked our values to the world based on like the color of our skin, our gender, and our body type. And so when we reject that, it gives us so much more power. When we stop buying into this belief that we're not enough as we are, we really become rich in our ability to show up for ourselves as opposed to societal expectations. And that door really opens to life where we can actually explore what truly fills us up, what truly is meaningful, what truly is purposeful for us. And it's, this whole idea of radical self-love is radical because it, means we have to reject this idea of some of us, certain body types, certain ways of being, eating, everything is more important than others, right? This like sliding scale of worth. And so it's really eradicating that and realizing like, no, like you're good. You're here. Your body's doing what it needs to do. And it's removing all these layers of conditioning and all these layers of shame and getting back to, intuitively, your body knows it needs, your body knows what it wants. And when we're no longer trying to live our life according to what externally we're told we should be doing, and rather turning that gaze inward, that's when we can start really thriving. But a lot of the time, we spend so much time looking outward that we never get the chance to figure out who we are and what we actually want in this life.
Right. No, and that's, and it's funny because I was meeting with a friend yesterday and we were talking about nutrition a little bit, and I've been helping him with some of his stuff. And he was just like, he's like, are you still, because I'm plant-based. And he's like, are you still plant-based? And I was like, yeah. He goes, man, in like 4 years. I was like, yeah. And he was like, dude, that's like so radical. I was like, well, I mean, not really. It's like, it's coming along. It's like more people are doing it. And, but he was just like, man, but you don't eat this, you don't eat that. I was like, well, no, because I said, but I'm extreme. Like I'm extreme and I live extreme. And like, cause I'm an endurance athlete. I run like 40, 45 miles a week. Like, like I'm extreme. I don't expect anybody else to do that. Like, I don't expect anybody else to do that. Like, I don't expect my clients to do that. My wife, anybody else. I'm like, if you want to, hey, that's great. But like you said, like, cause I know what I need. I know what makes me happy. I know, what fulfills me. And believe me, my wife will tell you, if I go 2 days without running, she's like, go run. Like, she's
please.
like, please, like you need it. Like, it's like, oh my gosh, get out there and do something. But it's like, it's, and that's sort of what I think people need to get to that point of like, my life looks extreme to other people. But to me, it's not, it's how I love myself, and I think that's the key to understanding. And it's sort of like we talked about, like when you're eating stuff that's not nutritional, your brain's not working properly. You're always on fight or flight. You're super anxious. Your emotions are on high alert all the time. And so you really don't know what makes you happy.
Yeah.
And
you just have
really
the quick
don't know,
fixes, the quick gratifications.
You really don't know what you love because you're always searching for that dopamine hit. You're not searching for what's going to make me happy long term. How do I get that longer sustaining dopamine release versus that, I got to get that immediate because I don't want to deal with that other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. 1,000%. And that's going to look different for everyone. Like you're saying, like
Right.
for you, it's that more extreme running. For me, I'm like, yeah, I know if I don't get outside enough during the day, I go into a bit of a mental like downward spiral.
Right.
If I don't go to the gym like a couple days in a row, again, going into a downward spiral. And if I don't get enough sleep, I worked with a mindset coach years and years ago. And I was like, I could never quite figure out why some days I just had a lot more negative thoughts. And we figured it out in a session. He's like, well, how much sleep are you getting? And I was like, oh my God, I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. Like I had early calls, late calls, whatever. But I'd always forget. And so he would always remind me when I would be like having a bit of a down day, he's like, how much sleep do you get? Oh, right. That's, I always feel down when I don't have enough sleep. And similar with women and their cycles, like, okay, I know where I am in my cycle. I know I'm going to be thinking more like right before you're about to have your period, you're going to have more negative body image thoughts, right? Having that awareness so you don't make it mean something about you going into it, like just my body, just my hormones. I know I'm not loving what I see in the mirror, but that's okay. Like, having that awareness is knowing yourself and what makes you happy and what makes you not happy is so incredibly important instead of just, grabbing for the quick fix to change how you're feeling that moment because you don't understand why you're feeling that way.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a key piece of understanding your body is just that awareness and being able to know that it's not just, I need to eat this because, it fuels me or whatever. Like, okay, at the basics, that's what it does, but there's more to like, cause you can get fuel from anything as far as like from a calorie standpoint. And so it's more to like, okay, if I eat this, it's going to make me feel better. It's going to make me sleep better. It's going to make me, like do all these things, function better as a person, as a body. And it may seem like that's just a small little bitty thing, like in and of itself. But like you said, with the interaction with other people, and all of a sudden, like if you sleep better, you're going to interact with people better. Right. And so you're going to end your day better because you're not going to be sitting there at the end of the day going, why did this person act that way? How did this conversation go so bad? And now you've got to filter through everything versus you can end the day going, that was a pretty good day.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
So what, cause I know I want to be respectful of your time. So what like can you share with us like a couple of tools to practice like starting to get into like intuitive eating? Like how can somebody like start this little like, okay, I understand I need to eat better, I understand it, but aside from like you said, going and finding some diet or finding somebody on Instagram to follow, like how can I just go like look in my pantry and go, okay, where do I start?
Yeah. So when you're even walking to the pantry, it seems like such a silly thing, but to ask yourself, am I hungry right now? Because so often we find ourselves eating when we're not necessarily hungry. So simple question, am I hungry? If the answer is yes, great. How hungry am I? Right. So like scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I'm basically passing out on the floor. I'm so empty. I have no food in me at all. 5 being like perfectly satiated. 10 being like, I am so full, I can't move. It's like, where on that scale are you? Because that's a good way to understand and gauge how much food you might be wanting to get. And
that's like, a great question.
Yeah, right. Because like a lot of the time we have a go-to of like whatever the snack is or whatever the meal is. And regardless of how hungry we are, we always create that amount because that's how we've always made it. Yeah. So having that awareness, I'm like, yeah, I'm not super hungry, but I could do a little something right now. Like maybe I'm like, I'm like a 4, a 3. A little something, versus just defaulting into like, oh, I have the ingredients to make this, so I'll make a whole giant thing of whatever. So like, intuitive eating is all about being intuitive. So asking yourself the question. So yeah, am I hungry? How hungry am I? What do I feel like eating? Right. Another simple thing, but like, what do I feel like eating? And like kind of going off of that is like, what would nourish me? What would feel good in my body? Instead of just necessarily grabbing for the first thing that you're seeing. And so having those moments of pause and reflection can be so life-changingly huge, even though they're so simple. And so with that, if I walk to the kitchen and I open the cupboard and am I hungry? The answer is no. That's also another option, opportunity rather to explore like, what is going on right now? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling bored? Because a lot of the time when we're going to eat food, right? It's a message from our body. Like something is coming up when we're reaching towards food and we're not actually hungry. And what is that message? Like, what is our body trying to tell us? It's trying to communicate something to us. And we're, shooting the messenger. We're stuffing the messenger full of food and telling them to go away, right? Never actually answering, acknowledging, like opening, what the heck is going on? Am I feeling like really lonely in my marriage? Or am I really unfulfilled in my work? And I keep going, but every night I'm eating a giant bowl of ice cream so that I don't have to think about that. And then every single night you'll end up going towards that ice cream because you're never dealing with these feelings of like, maybe this is not what I actually want in this life. And so when we get, slow down and start to ask yourself those questions, when I work with clients, like people have left marriages, people have changed jobs, people have gotten married, like big things can happen, small things as well. But they realize they've never actually sat and listened to what they actually want because they spent so many years distracting and numbing and avoiding who they were. And when they finally sat down with who they are, they're like, oh, wow, this is my life. But I don't think I even remember actively creating this life. It's just kind of the life I ended up with. And this is not actually what I even want.
Yep. So no, and I think that I don't know how many people I see that they go through that as well. Like, that it's like, as soon as they stop and sometimes, by the way, also, sometimes it could be like, you're not hungry, you're just thirsty, right?
Totally.
Like, you're dehydrated, but like just that basic question, like you said, can then lead to so many other things of like, okay, wait a minute. Like, if I'm going to have this argument, like, am I really upset or is this something else? Or is this, and it can lead to so many different life-changing, areas of your life that really are like, okay, now I'm happy. Now I'm like going towards the things that make me happy. And sometimes that's a struggle. And sometimes it's like you said at the beginning, it's like, you didn't think you were going to be here. It's not where you thought, you started out to be. Same thing with me. I was in the corporate world. It's not where I thought I would be. Are there struggles with it? Of course there are, but I'm much more happy now than I ever have been, but being happy also doesn't mean that you're not going to have depressive thoughts. You're not going to have anxious thoughts. You're still going to have those thoughts. It's the overall being happy. And I want to make sure people hear that piece, because sometimes they can be like, well, I mean, happy just it can't happen for me all the time. So it's not going to happen. Sort of like the perfectionism thing, like, happy is not an all the time thing. It's just that we're trying to get to a majority of the time thing.
Yeah. And humans are meant to feel the full spectrum of our emotions, right? Like, if we don't let ourselves be sad, we can't be happy.
Right.
And it's the resisting of, I shouldn't feel sad, and judging yourself and layering on the shame to our, quote unquote, negative emotions that keeps us stuck in them versus, like, I am feeling sad right now. Okay, it's okay. I feel sad. This happens sometimes. Like, like, that's how you move through it. That's how you process it, when you acknowledge and allow and just sit with it.
Yep.
And, I think you can only really be happy if you've let yourself be sad, because otherwise you're numbing and distracting from the really sad moments. You can't really be truly happy. And you live in this weird little middle zone where you're just feel a whole lot of nothingness, not quite content, not quite broken, but just burned out, drained, just a whole lot of feeling stuck. And a lot of it because, you're not allowing yourself to feel how you're meant to feel, because we posted this sticker of happy, gratitude, positive vibes only. And that's not being human, right? It's obviously, it's nice to have a more positive attitude, but that only comes from allowing yourself to feel how you genuinely feel without the judgment, without the shame, so you can move through it and then get back to those more positive feelings.
Right. Yep. Exactly. So you have podcast Weighing In on Happy, which I'm assuming is available like on wherever anybody wants to listen to podcasts. So how else would someone, if they wanted to get in touch with you or follow you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah. So weighing in on happy, the whole thing is like, your weight doesn't make you happy. And we talk about all different, things related to that. So you can find me over on Instagram. That is at Victoria Evans Official. I'm on TikTok. That is at Intuitive Eating with Vic, and Vic is spelled VIC. My website, lots of information there. If you want to work with me, I have courses, toolkits, all the things. So www.victoriaevansofficial.com. And feel free to send me a DM, a message if you're listening to this. I'm the one answering all the messages. Would love to chat with you. Any takeaways, any questions. So
Right. Awesome. And I will link all those things up in the show notes so they're easy for people to access. So But this has been great, Victoria. I so appreciate you being on.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking out the All in Health and Wellness Confidence Through Health podcast. Our goal is to use health as a conduit to help you reach your goals in life.
A little lighter than me. I'm about to black out. Her grip is getting tighter on me. I think I like it deep inside. I feel the fire in me. She like the milky, see me creaming to the coffee to me. She got soul in her sway.